There are two kinds of cargo that board a plane, one breathes, the other reminds us why we still can. That's what my drill sergeant told me at Paris Island, voice like gravel and disdain, pointing at a cargo plane lifting off in the distance. I never forgot it. I didn't expect it to come back to me standing in an airport terminal, but there I was, Gate 17A in Dallas, at 6 in the morning, the air thick with burnt coffee and boarding calls. And there he was, too. Laid out before me in a casket draped with the flag, Private First Class Daniel Reed. 22. Too young to drink the beer he joked about, old enough to carry a rifle. I stood with one hand resting flat on that flag, my back straight. I'd stood post before. In worse heat. Under gunfire. In silence. But I hadn't done it like this, in a place full of people pretending not to see. The airport manager wasn't pretending anymore. He'd approached with a clipboard tucked against his ribs like a shield. His voice carried the strain of someone trained to manage schedules, not grief. "Sir, step away from the flag." I didn't. I stayed still, my hand steady, fingers spread wide enough to feel every fold of that cloth beneath my palm. I kept my eyes on the flag, not him. He tried again, softer this time. "Sir, you can't be here." But I could. Because I'd promised. Not with words, but with everything that gets left behind when a man dies in your arms. Danny was mine. My Marine. My responsibility. The kid who couldn't swim worth a damn, who joked that he'd drown with dignity if it came to that. I'd pulled him out of a ravine once during a monsoon patrol in Helmand Province, soaking, cussing, laughing like he'd just lost a bet instead of nearly his life. I wasn't going to let him drown now, not in a sea of airport noise, not in the indifference of moving bodies. Still, the manager stood his ground. He waved over a supervisor, who made a call, and then security started moving. Two officers, radios clipped to their shoulders, palms resting light on the butts of their tasers. Because that's how the world handles interruptions. "We're not a memorial hall," the supervisor muttered. "Cargo needs moving." Cargo. That word again. Like Danny was just a box with a barcode, slotted between suitcases and boxes of produce, waiting to be stowed. I could have explained the code we lived by, the tradition of never leaving a fallen comrade, that the dead get a guard, a watchful eye until they're home. But what use are explanations when the man in front of you measures life by schedules and the movement of baggage? So I stood, and I remembered Danny humming "Sweet Home Alabama" after every mission, even though he wasn't from Alabama. He'd hum it under his breath while cleaning his rifle, saying it kept the nightmares away. And then, cutting through all of it, came a child's voice. A girl, small, innocent, asking her mother just loud enough for the terminal to catch. "Mommy, why is he holding the flag?" Her mother shushed her quickly, apologetically. But I answered anyway, still facing forward. Because someone has to make sure he doesn't feel forgotten between here and home. It wasn't a declaration. It was just truth. And sometimes, truth settles into the air heavier than any engine noise. The terminal went quiet in that soft, eerie way, the sound of travelers caught between curiosity and reverence. The security guards slowed. People started watching, not just with their eyes, but with that stillness in their bodies, the way a person watches a funeral procession even when they didn't know the dead. My hand stayed on the flag. My spine stayed straight. No one moved. No one spoke. I waited, breathing in the airport air, thin and recycled, but enough. Enough to remind me that I was still here because Danny wasn't. And someone had to stand watch. The pause hung longer than anyone expected. Maybe because people don't know what to do when a place meant for movement, for coming and going, suddenly becomes a place of stillness. I stayed rooted, my hand heavy on the flag. The security guards exchanged looks, their steps stalled mid-approach. Maybe they'd seen the videos. Arlington burials, honor guards. Maybe they just didn't know how to confront a man who wasn't making a scene, but holding a line no one else could see. I didn't care what they'd do next. I'd been pushed by worse hands in worse places. Then I moved. Not because they told me to, but because duty doesn't sit still. I stepped forward, guiding the casket with the handlers as they prepared to load it down the jet bridge. I didn't speak to them. I didn't need to. They saw it in the way I walked, that I was taking him the rest of the way. I didn't ask permission. Marines don't ask to keep a promise. As we walked, the hush followed. Voices softened. The buzz of conversation dimmed like someone had slowly turned the volume knob down on the entire terminal. And then, as if on cue, the ripple began. A man in a tailored business suit, who'd been tapping through emails, stood. Without ceremony, he removed his hat and pressed it to his chest. No one asked him to. Further along, a janitor paused, mop in hand. He straightened, back stiff, chin lifted like some old muscle memory took over. I recognized the stance. A man who'd once stood at attention for a flag, now doing it for the body wrapped beneath it. Then came a sound. Quiet, tentative. A hum. I didn't know who started it, but I knew the tune, the Star-Spangled Banner, carried on barely their voices, humming shyly but steadily. Someone else joined, and then another. The murmur turned into a quiet chorus. I kept walking. We reached the gate, the wide window framing the tarmac like a stage. Beyond it, the plane waited, engines idle, silver in the morning light. The Reed family stood there already, waiting for their boy. His mother, small, frail, as if grief had robbed her of any weight she'd once carried. Her eyes were swollen, cheeks red, her hands clutching something to her chest. A football jersey. I could see the number, 72, faded but preserved, as if fabric could keep a son alive a little longer. Beside her, Danny's father stood like a man trying to outrun collapse. His veteran's cap was clenched in his hands, not worn, as though even that was too much to bear. Next to them stood a younger boy. Same dark hair, same sharp nose as Danny. He stared at the casket like it was a puzzle he couldn't solve. As we approached, I stopped the handlers with a raised hand. They let me step forward. I folded the flag, tight corners, precise turns. Just like I was taught. The ritual made my hands steady even though my chest ached. I walked it to his mother. She reached out with both hands, trembling. She pressed the folded flag to her heart like she was trying to feel her boy's pulse in the cloth. He didn't die alone, I told her. My voice cracked. I let it. He was loved. He was honored. She looked at me with eyes that had nothing left to give. She didn't speak, but her nod was enough. The younger brother stepped forward, his voice a thread of sound. You made it home, Danny. The father choked on that. His shoulders trembled, but he didn't fall. Behind us, I heard footsteps. The airport manager, pale, eyes rimmed with red, approached carefully, like stepping through sacred ground. I didn't understand, he said. I'm sorry. I looked him dead in the eye, made sure my words didn't waver. Next time you see the flag, remember, it's not cloth. It's names you'll never meet and stories you'll never hear. Until now. I knew people had their phones out. I could feel the gaze of lenses on my back, the digital hunger for moments worth sharing. Good. Let them film. Let them remember that a flag doesn't just hang from a pole. It covers a body that breathed, laughed, loved. I stepped aside. The family needed these last moments more than I did. Danny's mother kissed the flag. His father whispered something I didn't catch. The younger brother just stood there, staring, memorizing the shape of the casket as if afraid he'd forget it by morning. The handlers loaded him carefully, reverently. When the hatch closed, sealing him in the cargo hold, I stood with my hand on the cold metal. I whispered so only he'd hear. Rest easy, Marine. You're almost home. The plane taxied away, engines low, hum steady. I watched until it was gone, swallowed by the sky. And then the airport started breathing again. People returned to their gates. Conversations resumed, but quieter. The anthem faded into silence, but something stayed, like smoke after a fire. The manager stood beside me, still watching the empty tarmac. I was wrong, he said. I didn't know. You do now. I walked away then. Boots heavy, back straight, just like I'd walked through worse. The terminal returned to normal. Flights called, people rushed. But not all of them. Some still stood, hats in hand, eyes misted, not because they knew Danny, but because, for a brief moment, they did. And that was enough. I didn't have to look back to know that. I just kept walking. I left the terminal behind, but pieces of it clung to me, the silence, the stares, the child's voice asking why I stood guard, the weight of Danny's flag still warm in my hands. The hotel was a short walk, but my steps felt longer, each one pulling a thread from memory. By the time I reached my room, the sun was already slanting low, casting everything in that pale gold that makes you remember places you've never been. The room was small, impersonal. A bed, a desk, a chair. I didn't turn the lights on. I sat in the chair, back straight, palms resting on my knees, boots still laced. That was the thing about funerals, whether they're in a chapel, a cemetery, or an airport gate, you don't want to take your boots off after. Like loosening the laces would mean admitting it was really over. I reached for my wallet, pulled out the photograph I kept folded inside, creased corners, colors fading. Danny, shirt half untucked, grinning like he knew some joke the rest of us hadn't caught up to. Beside him, me, younger, eyes clearer, shoulder patched with the eagle, globe, and anchor. The squad bunched around us, a blur of faces I couldn't forget even if I tried. I traced the lines of his face with my thumb. Somewhere in Kentucky, his family was holding that flag, sitting in a house that didn't sound right anymore. His mother probably still clutching that jersey, his father sitting too still, his brother staring into walls hoping they'd speak back. I'd seen it before. Hell, I'd lived it. A vibration shook the cheap wooden table beside me. My phone. I didn't answer right away. I watched it buzz, screen lighting up with a number I didn't recognize. Eventually, I picked it up. Yeah. A woman's voice, unsure. Is this Gunnery Sergeant Mason? I hadn't heard that title in a while. Who's asking? My name's Charlotte Hayes. I was at the airport this morning. I saw what you did. I didn't respond. I wasn't sure what to say. I'm sorry to bother you, she continued. But I wanted to thank you. I think the world should have seen that. Ma'am, the world doesn't need to see me. No, she said. But they need to see what that flag covers. I stayed silent. She filled the space. I posted a video. A short one. Just your hand on the flag, what you said to that little girl. It's everywhere now. Millions of views. I sighed. People love to watch things they'll forget by morning. Maybe. But some of us won't. I didn't know this woman, but her voice had a weight. Like she carried a memory of her own. Your husband serve? I asked. My father, she said. Vietnam. He didn't come back. That explained it. I'm sorry, I offered. Thank you for standing for him too, she said. For all of them. She wanted me to say something profound. I didn't have anything. Only the kind of tired that settled in your bones. I was just doing what I promised. Then I hung up. I didn't mean to be cold. But gratitude feels misplaced when you're standing alone in a motel room with a folded photograph for company. I stretched out on the bed, boots still on, staring at the ceiling. I let my mind drift, not to the terminal, not to the flag, but to the smell of damp earth in Helmand, the sound of Danny's humming after a mission, that dumb off-key, Sweet Home Alabama. He said it kept the nightmares away. He never said whose nightmares. Mine hadn't gone anywhere. I must have drifted because I woke in darkness, the air still and thin. The photo had fallen to the floor. I picked it up, brushing the corner clean like it was something sacred. The TV glowed faint in the corner. I hadn't turned it on, but the last guest had. The screen played muted news, the kind that runs overnight when no one's really watching. But then I saw it. Me. At the terminal. Standing beside the flag. The headline beneath, "The Cost of Freedom, a Marine Stands Vigil." I sat up straighter. The footage showed the people watching, the man in the suit, the janitor standing at attention. It even caught the little girl asking her question. The anchors didn't know my name. They speculated. A Marine, unidentified, accompanied the casket of PFC Daniel Reed, 22, killed in action overseas. They didn't know Danny. They didn't know me. And yet the world was watching. For how long, I didn't know. I shut the TV off. Next morning, I woke before the sun. Old habit. Military conditioning. I laced my boots tighter this time. The streets outside were quiet, the city still sleeping. I walked aimlessly at first, hands buried deep in the jacket's pockets. The air carried that pre-dawn chill that felt like winter's last breath. A diner blinked open a block away. Neon buzzing, the scent of coffee and grease already in the air. I went in. Took a booth by the window. The waitress, hair tied back, tattoos down her arms, didn't say much beyond pouring the coffee. At the counter, a man with a phone was scrolling. I caught a glimpse of my face again. The same clip. When the waitress returned, she nodded toward the phone. "That's you, ain't it?" I didn't answer. She didn't need me to. "Marine?" I nodded. Figured. She poured more coffee, lingered. My uncle was a Marine. Didn't make it home. I looked up at her. She didn't need to say more. She carried it in her face, in her eyes, people who live with the echo of someone who never came back. "He had a saying," she said. "You know what Semper Fi means? Always faithful." She smiled, sad. "He used to say it means you never let go. Not even after." I sipped the coffee. He was right. She stood there, then patted the table once before walking off. I watched the city wake up. Cars passed. People moved. I thought about Danny. About the flag. About how many other Marines, soldiers, sailors, airmen were coming home under flags no one would see because the cameras weren't there. The thought sat heavy. I pulled a crumpled napkin from the dispenser and started writing, not a letter, not a story. Just a list. Names of men I'd carried, either in arms or memory. Names no reporter would ever say. No camera would capture. I wrote until the coffee went cold. And I kept writing. Because remembering was the only thing I had left to give. And I wasn't done yet. The list stretched longer than the napkin could hold. Names, some I hadn't said out loud in years. Faces that flickered just behind my eyelids when sleep tried and failed to take hold. There was Miller, shot outside San Jin. Torres, lost to an IED 2 days before he was supposed to rotate home. Peterson, who took a round to the neck and still kept firing until his hand wouldn't close around the trigger anymore. Danny, of course, at the end of the list, though he never belonged at the end of anything. I folded the napkin carefully, slid it into my jacket pocket like it was currency I might need later. The waitress caught me doing it as she passed with another pot of coffee. "Writing a letter?" she asked. "A list." She raised an eyebrow. "Of people who deserve remembering." She nodded like she understood. Maybe she did. Everyone carries ghosts, but some wear them where you can see. "You hungry?" I hadn't thought about food. I couldn't remember the last meal I actually tasted, but my stomach had other ideas. "Yeah," I said. She smiled and scribbled something on her pad before walking off. When she returned, she set down a plate heavy with eggs, bacon, and toast. No menu. No price discussed. Just a meal. "On the house," she said. "My uncle would have wanted that." I didn't argue. I ate because it was what the living did. Each bite mechanical but necessary, like cleaning a rifle after a firefight. You don't always want to, but you have to. By the time I finished, the diner was filling up. People filing in with briefcases, gym bags, day plans. I watched them. I watched how easy it was for life to resume. The world didn't pause long, even for the dead. The bell over the door jingled again. 2 men in casual suits entered, talking low but laughing. One of them glanced my way, his face shifting from indifference to recognition. "You're the Marine," he said. I didn't reply. "From the airport." "The video." He sounded impressed, like I'd been in a movie. "Not in a war. Not carrying a boy under a flag." "Guess that's me." His friend stepped forward, hand extended. "Appreciate your service, sir." I shook it out of habit, the grip too firm like he was trying to prove something. His handshake wasn't for me, it was for the story he'd tell later. They sat 2 booths down, still talking about the video, about the flag, about how we need more people like that. I stared out the window, teeth grinding unconsciously. More people like that, I thought. Like what? People who bury the ones they couldn't keep alive. People who carry names on napkins. I dropped a few bills on the table, enough to cover the meal if the waitress had meant it as charity. Outside, the air had warmed, the sun climbing higher, indifferent and bright. I walked because I didn't know what else to do. Every street felt like a memory, even if I'd never been there before. Every alley looked like somewhere I'd lost a friend. Every rooftop, a potential threat. Some things never leave you. I found myself near a park. Benches, scattered trees, children climbing on plastic forts pretending to be castles. I sat on a bench near the edge, watching them. A father lifted his daughter high onto his shoulders, her laugh pealing loud and sharp into the morning air. I wondered if Danny's father had ever done that for him. If Danny had ever felt 10 feet tall because his dad's shoulders carried him above the world. My phone buzzed again. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. Another buzz. A text this time. "This is Charlotte Hayes again. I know you didn't want attention, but people want to know who you are. Media's asking." I stared at the message. The phone buzzed again. "You don't have to respond. I just thought you should know. They're calling you the Watchman." I scoffed aloud. The Watchman. As if a moment of duty caught on camera turned you into something larger than you were. But then another message. "There's a family in Kentucky who wants to meet you. The Reeds. They saw the video." I didn't reply. I pocketed the phone and kept watching the park. Then I thought of Danny's mother. The way her hands shook when I placed the flag in them. The way her knees almost gave, but she stood anyway. They deserved more than a stranger in a viral clip. I stood, legs stiff, and started walking back toward the motel. I called Charlotte back. She answered on the second ring. "I'll meet them," I said. "Thank you," she replied. I could hear the relief. "They'll be at the funeral home tomorrow." They're bringing him home tonight. I thanked her and hung up. Tomorrow. That left me one night to gather myself. One night to decide what a man says to the family of a Marine he couldn't keep breathing. At the motel, I laid the napkin list on the bed, each name written small but careful. I stared at it until the sun dipped low, shadows climbing the walls. Then I took another napkin, unfolded it, and started again. This time, I wrote. Daniel Elijah Reed. 22. PFC Kentucky. Son. Brother. Humble. Brave. Couldn't swim but didn't stop trying. Loved his family. Loved his country. Hummed Sweet Home Alabama after missions. I kept writing. Not a list of names, but the pieces that made up one boy who became a flag. Because when I faced his family tomorrow, I wouldn't give them a name carved in stone. I'd give them Danny. As I wrote, the night settled deep, quiet and heavy. I worked under the glow of a single lamp, like a man assembling a story from memory and bone. By the time I stopped, the page was full. And for the first time in years, I wasn't writing to remember the dead. I was writing so they wouldn't be forgotten by the living. Morning came without permission. I'd slept in the chair, boots still on, back aching like I'd been through a ruck march. Light pushed through the edges of the curtains, soft but insistent. I folded the napkin I'd written on, the one with Danny's truths scribbled raw, and slid it into the inside pocket of my jacket, right next to the list of names from the day before. I stared at myself in the mirror for a while before leaving. Same eyes, same creases at the corners, but something looked heavier. Like the weight I carried had settled deeper in the bones. At the funeral home, the air was cooler, like grief had its own climate. I stepped through the double doors, greeted by the smell of polished wood, flowers that couldn't mask the scent of morning, and hushed conversations. A man in his 60s, thin hair, a suit worn like a formality rather than comfort, approached me. He held out a hand. Mr. Reed. Danny's father. I took his hand. His grip was neither firm nor weak, just tired. Thank you for coming, he said. I nodded. I had to. He led me down the hall to a small viewing room. The casket was there, open, polished, a flag folded perfectly on a stand nearby. Danny lay inside, his face composed, his uniform crisp, ribbons placed just so. He looked small somehow, like the wood around him made the boy disappear inside the Marine. His mother sat in the front row, holding the same football jersey from the airport. Her hands worked at the fabric like she was trying to smooth out time. The younger brother stood nearby, his eyes fixed on Danny, his mouth pressed into a line too straight for a boy his age. I stood there, not sure where to go, what to say. Mr. Reed motioned me forward. His mother looked up when I approached. Her eyes were clearer than before, but hollow. Thank you, she whispered. I shook my head. No, ma'am. Thank you for Danny. I knelt by the casket, looking at him one last time. He looked peaceful. But I knew better. Peace wasn't how you left the world in a combat zone. Peace was something dressed up after. I reached into my jacket and pulled out the napkin. I wrote some things, I said, voice low, unsure if it belonged in this room. About your son. About who he was over there. She watched me carefully, her gaze searching. I didn't want you to have just the flag, I continued. You deserve to know the boy who wore it. I unfolded the napkin, read it aloud. Each line felt like laying bricks, building the memory of him one fact at a time. Daniel Elijah Reed. 22. PFC Kentucky. Marine. Couldn't swim but said he'd drown with dignity. Loved country music even though he couldn't sing. Carried extra rations so the smaller guys didn't go without. He smiled even when the sun tried to kill us. He wrote his mother every Sunday, even in the dirt and rain. I paused. He hummed Sweet Home Alabama after every mission, even though he wasn't from there. Said it kept the nightmares away. His mother smiled faintly at that, the first time her face broke through the clouds. He was brave, ma'am. Not just in firefights. Brave in the quiet moments. Brave when none of us wanted to be. I folded the napkin carefully and placed it on the edge of the casket, under his folded hands. I want you to have that, I said. It's not official. But it's the truth. She reached out and touched my wrist. You brought my son home, she said. That's all I needed. I shook my head. He deserved more than a flag and a flight. He deserved to be remembered for who he was, not just how he died. Mr. Reed stood behind her, eyes wet but unblinking. The boy, Danny's brother, watched me like he was memorizing everything I said, like he needed to carry it forward when his mother couldn't. Can you tell me more? The boy asked suddenly. I looked at him, surprised. About what? I asked. About what he was like, over there. I nodded, sat on the edge of a chair, and began. Your brother was the kind of guy who made the heat feel less like punishment. He'd tell jokes that didn't land, but his laughter carried the rest of us through. He made the best instant coffee from ration packs, you wouldn't believe it. He kept photos of you all in his helmet liner. Said it made him bulletproof. The boy smiled then, just a flicker. He was scared sometimes. We all were. But he never let it sit on his face. And when the storms came, and they always came, he'd start humming that song. We thought it was annoying, but I'll be damned if it didn't help. I paused, voice catching. He wasn't just a Marine. He was family. To us. Silence fell after that, but it wasn't empty. It was full of all the things we couldn't say. His mother stood slowly, reached over, and hugged me. Her arms were thin, brittle with grief, but the embrace was steady. Thank you for loving my son, she whispered. I held on to that. When I left the room, the air felt different. Still heavy, but lighter than before. Outside, Charlotte Hayes waited, phone in hand, eyes gentle. You didn't have to come, she said. Yeah, I said. I did. They'll remember this, she said. Not just the video. This. They better. She smiled faintly. The Watchman. I shook my head. That's just a title. I was his gunnery sergeant. That's enough. She didn't argue. I looked back once, to the funeral home door, to the casket behind it. I whispered Danny's name under my breath. And then I walked away, boots heavy, but the ground beneath me sure. Because some loads you carry forever. But some, you share. The drive back to the motel blurred past cornfields, lonely gas stations, and miles of asphalt that looked the same no matter where you stood in America. I didn't notice much of it, not really. My mind replayed their faces instead, Danny's mother holding that napkin like scripture, his father standing tall but empty, the kid brother listening like the story I told was the last piece of his sibling he'd ever get. I thought I was done for the day. I wasn't. When I reached my room, there were messages waiting. Texts, voicemails, emails forwarded from numbers I didn't recognize. Sir, we'd like to interview you for the evening news. Your stories touched millions, can we get a statement? America wants to hear from its heroes. Heroes. I turned the phone over on the desk like maybe if I faced it away, the noise would stop. I'd spent my life stepping between noise and silence, between gunfire and grief. But this noise? The digital kind? It didn't care who you were, it just wanted your face, your words, your pain packaged clean enough for public consumption. I went to the sink, splashed water on my face, stared at the man looking back at me in the mirror. My eyes were ringed in something darker than sleep. A shadow you carry behind the pupils when you've watched too many boys die. Another vibration on the desk. I ignored it. But then came a knock on the door. I answered without thinking. A man stood there, camera on his shoulder, a reporter's badge swinging from his neck. He looked awkward, nervous, like he knew he was intruding but couldn't stop himself. "Gunnery Sergeant Mason?" he asked. I didn't answer. "I'm sorry to show up like this. But you're everywhere right now. That video, it's touched people." I stepped back. "I didn't do it for them." "I know. But you've started something. People are calling you the Watchman. They're saying this country needs reminders like you." I stared at him, waiting for the real ask. "We just want to hear why," he said. "Why you did it." I shook my head. "No. You don't want to hear that. Please," he pressed, eyes earnest. "People need to understand." I stood there, thinking about Danny's mother, about the napkin she held like a lifeline. About the boy who'd asked me to tell him who his brother was. About the men I carried on a different napkin, names smudged where the ink met my thumb. "You want a quote?" I asked. The reporter nodded, ready. I pointed to my chest. I did it because no one should travel home alone. He waited, as if more might come. But that was all. He left without more questions. That night, I didn't sleep. I wrote instead. Not names. Not just details. I wrote memories. Each man, each kid, because they were kids, most of them, who crossed my path in the sands, in the mud, in the godforsaken corners of the world. I wrote their smiles, their jokes, the songs they sang. I wrote about Danny's humming, about Torres' laugh, about Miller's bad handwriting on letters he begged me to proofread. I wrote until my hand cramped, until the room grew pale with morning light. Then my phone buzzed again. Another unknown number. This time, I answered. "Gunnery Sergeant Mason?" "Speaking. It's Colonel Phelps. You may not remember me, but I remember you. You trained my nephew in '08. The name clicked somewhere distant in my mind. "I saw the video," the colonel said. "I want to thank you for standing watch. That's what we're supposed to do. That's what we forget to do." I didn't know what to say. "There's going to be a memorial," he said. "At the base. For Reed and for others. The commandant wants you there. You'll speak." I shook my head instinctively. "I'm not good at speeches." "You don't have to be. Just show up. Show them what it looks like when someone still remembers." I wanted to say no. But I thought of the kid brother asking for stories. I thought of the flag. Of the eyes watching in that terminal. "All right," I said. "We'll fly you out. We'll cover everything. I'll get there myself," I said. "That's my job." He chuckled softly. "Semper Fi, Gunnery Sergeant. Semper Fi." I hung up. The motel felt smaller after that. Like the walls knew I wasn't supposed to stay. I packed what little I had. The jacket, the napkins, the photograph. My boots, dusty even though they hadn't seen a battlefield in years. I laced them tight. On my way out, the motel clerk stopped me. "You're him, right?" he asked. I nodded. "Thank you," he said, and he meant it. "For watching over that kid." I tipped my head and walked out. The road stretched ahead, long and indifferent. But I wasn't walking away this time. I was walking toward something. Toward a podium I didn't want, in front of faces I didn't know, to tell a truth I hadn't yet said aloud. That no one makes it home alone. Not if I can help it. I hit the road, the sun high and hard, and kept going. I was still on watch. Always would be. The memorial was held 2 weeks later, beneath a sky so clear it looked like someone had wiped it clean for the occasion. Rows of folding chairs lined the grass, faces sharp in their uniforms, others faded by time and loss. Families, Marines, old warhorses in suits too tight or too loose, but all standing when the flag marched past. I stood near the podium, boots planted, jacket buttoned tight, the napkin still folded in my pocket, the one with Danny's truths, worn soft at the creases. When they called me up, I didn't read from notes. I didn't need to. I was his gunnery sergeant, I said. But first, I was his brother. I let the silence carry the weight before I spoke again. He hummed Sweet Home Alabama to keep the nightmares away. He wrote his mother every Sunday. He carried rations for the smaller guys. He smiled when the heat made us curse the sun. I paused, voice low but steady. He didn't make it home the way we wanted. But he didn't come home alone. I let my eyes scan the crowd, resting on the families, the men and women in uniform, the ones who understood. That's the promise, I said. We don't leave them behind. Not there. Not here. Not ever. I stepped down to silence, the good kind. The kind that says people are holding their breath because they know something sacred just passed between them. As the ceremony ended, a woman approached, her hands shaking but her eyes fierce. She was Danny's mother. You kept your promise, she said. I nodded. Yes, ma'am. And I'm still keeping it. She took my hand. Her grip was stronger than I expected. When I left the base that afternoon, I didn't feel lighter. You don't walk away from that kind of thing without taking some of it with you. But I carried it gladly. Because that's the duty. That's the watch. And I'm still standing it.